Aaron Hernandez, guilty of first and second degree murder in the death of Odin Lloyd, as well as several firearms charges. We're trying to get Ebony Williams, is Ebony with us?
She is on the phone, I believe.
Yes.
Ebony.
Yes, hi.
Ebony,
Hi, Elaine.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Ebony. So the verdict in Aaron Williams is never going to see freedom. Sorry, excuse me. Aaron Hernandez is never going to see freedom. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Vlad. I mean, obviously this is, not necessarily unexpected by any of us in the legal community. There was, some evidentiary gaps in terms of murder weapon and things like that. But then there was just such a preponderance of evidence from the testimony from the people that were near the situation and the surveillance. And no, this is just definitely a situation where he's, going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And also, let us keep in mind, he's also still facing double homicide charges in another case in another county in Massachusetts. So this is really just the tip of the iceberg for Aaron Hernandez.
And so, Ebony, remind our viewers of what the circumstances were and what the legal arguments were by both sides here. This was the 2013 killing of the semi-pro football player Odin Lloyd. And what was it that prosecutors contended Hernandez did, and what did defense attorneys argue?
Sure. Okay. So they said that Hernandez killed Lloyd because he had made friends with some guys that Hernandez didn't like. And so to teach Lloyd a lesson, basically, Hernandez and two other guys drove him out to this isolated kind of industrial field, which happened to have surveillance cameras, the guys, so they were able to see this. And essentially, he was shot and killed. He was executed. I mean, it was a horrible crime. And although they never recovered the murder weapon, they did contend that this was obviously done. Also, the defense attorneys said that, you know what, nobody can put the gun in Aaron Hernandez's hand. And that was their key defense strategy, is although that they, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, there was no actual smoking gun. But you know what, guys? You don't have to have it in his hand to prove that he was indeed guilty.
All right. Ebony, stand by for us. I want to just let our viewers know what it is that they're looking at. This is a live picture outside the courthouse there in Fall River, Massachusetts, where this jury has just rendered its guilty verdict against Aaron Hernandez. Ebony, stay with us for a moment, but I want to go right now to Ben Volin, Boston Globe NFL reporter. Ben, what are your thoughts? This, as Ebony said, in the legal community is not a surprise necessarily.
Yeah, I can't say I'm completely shocked by the outcome of this. A lot of the evidence certainly pointed to her knowing what happened that night in the industrial park. That said, it is still very jarring and shocking to see a guy who was only 23 years old at the time, a star tight end who had a $40 million contract, a 7-month-old daughter, everything in front of him, the whole world, and just to throw it all away over this murder. It's just a shocking turn of events. That said, there was a lot of evidence, like I said, that pointed to Hernandez. Maybe if he didn't pull the trigger, he certainly knew what had to happen that night, and that's all that the jury needed to convict him of first-degree murder. They didn't have to prove that he was the shooter, just that he orchestrated and was a part of it, and the fact that there was a lot of surveillance of the four of them that night, and this was something that happened on his turf, a mile away from his home is where they found the body. They found a lot of DNA at the scene. There was a lot of evidence that pointed to Hernandez being involved in this.
We also, stand by, Ben, we also want to bring in Randy ZELIN, an attorney. Randy, are you with us?
Hi.
Randy, so I have a question on what the jury was deliberating here. They had to accept sort of two theories of how to convict Aaron Hernandez of first-degree murder, and one of those had to do with the first-degree conviction as to whether or not he did it with atrocity and cruelty. What does that mean in the state of Massachusetts?
Well, it's exactly what it sounds like, though. I've always wondered, when is a homicide not atrocious and cruel, but be that as it may, you typically will marry that to some level of premeditation or some level of really just a horrific way of either killing someone or disposing of it. But again, I think really it's like trying to define obscenity. You just know it when you see it, and when isn't it not horrible or atrocious?
But he's charged with, but he was also charged with second-degree murder, which removed that exception of extreme cruelty and atrocity.
Correct. What happens is The real differences, the critical differences between the first and the second. On the first, you've got the concept of premeditation or the particular atrocious way of doing it. And then with second, you don't need to have those things. So I think essentially if anyone wants to know why did it take them so long, remember, there was no murder weapon. There was no real smoking gun. There was no confession. And oftentimes, jurors will really agonize over punching someone out on a murder charge without that evidence linking the hand of the person to the gun that pulled the trigger.
All right, Randy, if you'll stand by for us, I want to bring back in Ebony Williams. Ebony, what happens now?
Yeah, well, Elaine, now they're going to move forward. This is, pretty much a mandatory sentence of life in prison. He's not going to see the light of day. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg because he's still awaiting charges. That the judge in the other case said that we're going to wait for this to play out. We now get a guilty verdict here. He's still going to have to answer, in the court of law for these other two homicides that the prosecution is alleging that he did because those families want justice too. And just because he was found guilty today, he still has to answer for these other two murders.
Ben Volen of the Boston Globe, how has the NFL been reacting through all of this, and what do you think that they will do, or what are you hearing from your sources that they will say and do going forward?
Well, the NFL has, and the Patriots, of course, have really distanced themselves from Aaron Hernandez, really from the second that he was arrested. The Patriots released him 2 years ago in June before they even knew that he was going to be arraigned for murder. They thought he was just going to be an accessory to the case, but they still cut him because they didn't want anything to do with a guy who's even involved in a murder. Little did they know that he was going to be arraigned on first-degree murder charges, and of course, here we are 2 years later, and he's guilty on those charges, life without parole. The NFL has banned Aaron Hernandez immediately. They said he's not, even if he were set free, that he wouldn't be allowed to play until the commissioner allows him back in. The Patriots and University of Florida, where he played college, have basically erased every trace of history that Aaron Hernandez was ever a member of those organizations. He was an All-American tight end, won the nation's award for the best tight end. They took out his brick at the University of Florida. They removed him from the All-American walk. The Patriots have removed all items from the Patriots Hall of Fame. They allowed fans to exchange their jerseys and get another jersey. So they have completely wiped the slate clean, and Hernandez has been a total persona non grata around the Patriots facility the last 2 years. They have completely wiped away any memory of Hernandez being a Patriot.
Ben, do you think that the testimony by Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, how do you think that played into the decision that we're hearing today?
I don't think it was a major part of the case. I think mostly it had to do with Hernandez's girlfriend carrying away the box that they presumed had the murder weapon in it. Certainly all the surveillance tape and the DNA that they found. But it was still very jarring to see Robert Kraft up on the witness stand, him admitting that Aaron Hernandez swore up and down to him that he had nothing to do with this. He said, check the tape, find the time of the murder. It'll prove that I was in the club, and that makes you scratch your head. Well, how did Aaron Hernandez know the time of the shooting? And Aaron Hernandez swore on the life of his baby daughter at the time that he was innocent and he had nothing to do with this. So I don't think that was certainly anything that sealed the deal for the prosecution. However, it's still very jarring to see Robert Kraft visibly shaken up on the witness stand, recalling some of the events of that day.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly not something we see every day. Is there a long-term effect on the Patriots? I mean,
he was a huge. I mean, he was a big factor on that team, was he not? For people who don't follow football, how much the position that he played and the stats and how defenses racked up against him, he was a big deal.
This guy was a star player. Like I said, he was an All-American at college. He fell in the draft, but only because he had red flags. But again, that had nothing to do with guns and murder. Obviously, if the Patriots or the NFL had known he was capable of this, he would not have been drafted to play in the NFL. His red flags were really only for marijuana use, and this was a guy who stayed pretty clean for his 3 years in the NFL, passed every drug test, and really wasn't a problem for the Patriots off the field. But once he got away from the facility and away from the watchful eye of Bill Belichick and the Patriots, he obviously was up to a lot of no good.